I'm 29 years old, and honestly, I thought my relationship with my little sister, Chloe, who's 24, was pretty solid. We've always had that classic sibling push-pull, competing for attention, sharing clothes, reluctantly, but ultimately being each other's person. That's why what happened a few weeks ago has me completely reeling and questioning everything I thought I knew about her. I feel like I'm living in some twisted reality TV show, and I can't find the remote to turn it off. My fiancé, Mark, proposed back in June with this absolutely stunning vintage emerald-cut diamond ring. It wasn't just expensive, it was incredibly personal. He'd designed the setting himself, and the diamond belonged to his grandmother. It meant the world to me. I've been showing it off nonstop, partly because I love it, but mostly because I love him, and it's the symbol of our future. A month ago, Chloe called, all sweet and bubbly, asking a huge favor. She's a huge wannabe influencer, all perfectly posed lattes and travel flat lays, and she told me she had a huge opportunity for a sponsored jewelry post, but her own rings were too basic. She asked if she could borrow my engagement ring for a couple of hours for a professional photo shoot on a closed set. I was hesitant, maybe even a little paranoid, but she promised she'd treat it like a newborn baby and return it that same afternoon, hand-delivered. Mark told me to trust her, saying she'd never do anything to genuinely hurt me. Against my better judgment, I said yes, carefully handing over the velvet box. The couple of hours turned into a day, then two, with Chloe giving me increasingly vague excuses about the photographer needing extra shots or the studio being closed. My paranoia started to bubble into genuine anxiety. I kept texting, keeping my tone light, but making it very clear I needed the ring back now. I wasn't sleeping well, imagining all the ways something could go wrong, and I wasn't shy about telling Mark how much I regretted letting her take it. Finally, on the third day, I drove over to her apartment, unannounced. The minute she opened the door, she looked completely caught, not annoyed, but genuinely nervous. I bypassed the pleasantries, stating flat out that I was there for the ring. Her smile dropped, and the air got heavy. She led me to her bedroom, and there it was, sitting on her dresser, only it wasn't in the velvet box. It was sparkling in a glass jewelry dish next to her rings, looking completely at home. When I reached for it, that's when the real twist hit, the one that makes my stomach absolutely churn. Chloe actually stepped in front of the dresser and gently blocked my path. She didn't shout or argue. Her voice was soft, almost manipulative, as she told me that the ring looked better on her and that the photo shoot wasn't for a jewelry brand at all, but a way for her to see how it felt to have such a beautiful piece. My mind was scrambling, trying to figure out if this was some incredibly dark joke. I stood there, speechless, because what she said next made even less sense. She claimed that since she wore it for the professional shots, and since it suited her so well, she was keeping it as a long-term loan, or maybe just making it hers, and that I could probably just get a different, simpler one. She genuinely seemed to believe she was entitled to keep the symbol of my engagement, almost like she'd convinced herself it was a family heirloom up for grabs. I walked out, shaking and furious, not willing to escalate it into a physical fight over property, but I called Mark immediately. He was completely horrified, of course, and immediately called her, trying to reason with her. He even tried to use the family history angle, stressing the grandmother connection. Chloe's response to him? That he should just buy me a new diamond, one without the old lady baggage, and that this one was a better fit for her brand. I couldn't believe her audacity. It was a stunning display of entitlement I never knew she possessed. Now I'm sitting here, watching her Instagram stories. She's wearing my ring in almost every frame, tagging random expensive jewelry brands, and talking about manifesting your dream life. I'm completely devastated, not just about the ring, but about my sister. My fiancé is demanding she return it. Our parents are furious and trying to intervene, and Chloe is ignoring everyone, acting like this is just a minor sibling squabble. I feel betrayed and violated. I need to know. How could my own sister do something this cruel? And what is the absolute best way to force her to give back the most important piece of jewelry I own without completely destroying our family? My head was spinning after leaving Chloe's apartment. I drove home in a daze, the image of my ring on her hand, next to her cheap fashion jewelry, burned into my memory. It felt like a punch to the gut, the betrayal compounded by her casual cruelty. Mark met me at the door, his face pale and serious. He had already talked to my parents, and their reaction was exactly what I needed. Immediate, blazing anger at Chloe, not at me for lending it. The four of us, Mark, my parents, and I, had an emergency video call that night. My mom was crying, saying she couldn't believe her daughter was acting this way, calling it pure theft. My dad, usually the most laid-back person, was talking about contacting his lawyer friend. They agreed to meet Chloe the next day, without me, hoping a united front from the parents would make her see reason. They thought maybe she was just having some kind of self-obsessed meltdown and needed a firm reality check from the people who raised her. The meeting was a disaster. My parents went to her apartment, armed with calm arguments and appeals to her conscience and family loyalty. Chloe, however, was prepared. She didn't rage or cry. Instead, she got cold and defensive. She told them they were taking my side without understanding the full picture. She actually tried to paint me as the villain, claiming I had too many nice things and that she was simply leveling the playing field. She even twisted the facts, saying I had offered it to her as a gift for her career boost and was now regretting it. My parents left empty-handed, utterly defeated by her gaslighting and sheer lack of remorse. When they told me what happened, I broke down. This wasn't just about the money or even Mark's grandmother's diamond. It was about the sister I thought I had, the one who was supposed to be in my wedding. I realized that the only thing she respected was consequence, not connection. Mark, bless his heart, immediately took over. He spent the evening researching. He found the original appraisal for the ring, which clearly stated the unique setting and the stone's provenance, and he found an old picture of his grandmother wearing it. We had ironclad proof of ownership. The next morning, Mark drafted an official-looking letter, not from a lawyer yet, but something that looked intimidating. It was addressed to Chloe, detailing the ring's value, the ownership history, and explicitly stating that her possession of it was theft. The letter gave her 24 hours to return the ring to our parents' house or face a police report for the theft of property exceeding a certain value. We put in a high, scary number, and a potential civil lawsuit. I was shaking as Mark sent it as a certified email, but I knew we had to go nuclear. We waited, staring at the clock, jumping every time my phone buzzed. I kept thinking about how this was the most awful thing to happen in my adult life, all over a piece of jewelry that should have symbolized love, not this toxic, jealous mess. Chloe, of course, broke the 24-hour deadline. She didn't respond to the email, and she blocked Mark's number. She did, however, do something else. She posted a story on Instagram, a close-up of my ring catching the light, with the caption, "Unbothered, living my best life." It was a direct slap in the face. That picture, that mocking caption, was the final straw. It extinguished any tiny flicker of hope I had that she would suddenly have a conscience. Mark was livid and immediately called the police's non-emergency line to ask about filing a report. The officer he spoke to said that since there was an established family relationship and the transfer was voluntary, even if under false pretenses, it was technically a civil matter unless we had a clear written contract or proof she intended to sell it. My heart sank. A civil lawsuit meant time, money, and burning the family bridge to the ground. The police advice meant the letter was mostly a bluff, and Chloe knew it. We realized we needed a new approach, one that hit her where it really hurt, her online presence and the image she so desperately curated. My dad suggested a tactic that was both risky and potentially brilliant, something that would flip the script entirely and expose her carefully constructed facade to the people who mattered most to her, her followers. Could public humiliation be the only thing that works? Update 1. My parents' attempts at reasoning were a total bust, and the police basically told us it was too messy to be criminal theft, because I lent it to her. The legal bluff failed. I am now officially moving on to the nuclear option that hits Chloe's ego the hardest, but I'm terrified of what this will do to the family. Should I unleash the truth bomb on social media and risk a massive family fallout? Or is there one last, quiet way to get back my ring? After the police basically told us we were on our own and Chloe threw our legal threat back in our faces with that smug Instagram post, I felt a deep, cold sense of resolve settle over me. The time for being the bigger person, or hoping she'd spontaneously develop empathy, was over. She had chosen her path of manipulation and theft, and I had to fight fire with fire. Mark and I agreed. We had to expose her online. This was terrifying. I'm a pretty private person. I only use social media to share pictures of my cats and the occasional vacation snap. Chloe, on the other hand, lives on those platforms, cultivating an image of a successful, glamorous, and authentic lifestyle guru. My dad, who ironically suggested this, put it best. If her brand is her currency, you have to devalue it. I spent hours crafting the post. It couldn't be a hysterical rant. It had to be factual, emotionally resonant, and completely undeniable. I decided to post it to my private Facebook, which included all of Chloe's close friends, mutual family connections, and even a few of the smaller brands she sometimes tagged. I didn't tag her, but I knew the network was small enough that it would get back to her instantly. The post was simple: a picture of Mark and me at our engagement, with a close-up of my ring on my hand. The caption detailed the beautiful story of the ring, the significance of Mark's grandmother, and then, in brutally honest terms, narrated how Chloe had falsely claimed it was for a sponsored shoot, how she had blocked my retrieval attempts, and how she was currently wearing the stolen property while mocking me online. I made sure to include a screenshot of her unbothered post. I ended with a heartfelt plea for anyone who cared about me or the truth to encourage her to do the right thing. I hit post and immediately felt sick. It was the digital equivalent of setting off a bomb. The reactions were instantaneous and overwhelming. Within 10 minutes, I had dozens of comments. Not just family members expressing outrage, but people from her own circle. I saw messages from friends I hadn't spoken to in years, all expressing shock and support. The one comment that really stunned me came from an acquaintance who was a semi-professional jewelry photographer. He confirmed that Chloe had approached him for a personal project and had never mentioned brand sponsorship. The real chaos, however, was happening on Chloe's end. My mom, who was secretly keeping tabs, reported that Chloe's phone was exploding. Not long after my post went up, the floodgates opened. I started receiving direct messages from her friends. They were embarrassed and furious. One girl messaged me, saying Chloe had told her the ring was a gift from an anonymous, wealthy suitor and was trying to convince a small luxury goods company that she could promote their items because she was that successful. Her entire narrative was unraveling in real time. It only took about 2 hours for the inevitable call to come, but it wasn't from Chloe. It was from her best friend Sarah, who sounded completely stressed. Sarah explained that Chloe was having a meltdown, not because she felt bad, but because her carefully constructed online world was crumbling. Her engagement rate was tanking, and 2 of the brands she frequently worked with had unfollowed her. Sarah's message was a panicked, self-serving plea. She needs the drama to stop. What do you need to make this go away? The tide had finally turned. I took a deep breath, trying to keep the triumph out of my voice. I told Sarah there was only one condition. The ring had to be placed immediately inside an envelope and dropped off at our parents' house. Not mine, not hers, but neutral ground. I gave her 1 hour. I wasn't going to accept excuses, negotiations, or delays. The crisis was now in her court, and she had to choose between her pride and her precious online life. The wait was agonizing. Would she actually choose the virtual over the valuable? Or would she finally concede and return my family heirloom? Update 2. Publicly exposing Chloe's lie on social media worked instantly. Her friends and some brands pulled away, completely destroying her influencer facade. Her best friend Sarah contacted me begging for the drama to stop. I gave her 1 hour to drop the ring off at our parents' house. No questions asked. I'm waiting now, heart pounding, to see if the threat to her image is stronger than her greed. That hour I gave Sarah felt like an entire year. Mark and I paced our small living room, the atmosphere thick with nervous energy and silent prayers. We were completely exhausted, but the anticipation kept us wired. We had finally managed to hit Chloe where she lived, her self-image, and we knew this was the last best chance to get the ring back without resorting to an actual lawyer and a messy civil court battle that would financially and emotionally drain everyone. The notification finally came, not from Sarah, but from my mother. It was a single cryptic text message. It's here. No exclamation marks, no long explanation, just those 2 words. Mark and I looked at each other, the tension breaking in a collective, shaky sigh. The nuclear option had worked. The desire to maintain her precious fake online persona was evidently stronger than her greed or her misplaced sense of entitlement to my property. We drove over immediately. The ring was exactly where my mom said it was, sitting on the dining room table, inside a small padded jewelry envelope. The velvet box was nowhere in sight, which felt like a final petty act of defiance. But I didn't care. I picked up the envelope, my hands trembling. Opening it felt like closing a horrible, stressful chapter. The emerald-cut diamond sparkled, familiar and perfect. I slid it onto my finger, and the relief was immediate and overwhelming. It was home. My parents were quiet. My mom confessed that Chloe had not brought it herself. Sarah had dropped it off, looking completely miserable, and just handed the envelope to my dad without saying a word. Chloe hadn't called, hadn't texted, and hadn't apologized. She had chosen the path of silent concession, prioritizing her reputation over repairing the relationship. My dad said he'd tried to call her afterward to talk about what had just transpired, but she sent his call straight to voicemail. The online fallout, however, was just beginning. While the ring was back on my hand, the drama was still echoing across social media. I quickly went back to my original Facebook post and updated it simply. The ring has been safely returned. Thank you all for your support. I thought that would be the end of it. But Chloe's friends and followers were already deep into the gossip. Mark's sister even messaged me a screenshot of a massive gossip thread on an obscure forum where Chloe was now being discussed as the fake ring influencer. I thought about calling her, about trying to talk through the gaping wound she'd torn in our relationship, but Mark held me back. He pointed out that she hadn't given me the courtesy of an apology or even a brief explanation, just the stone-cold return of stolen property via a third party. The silence felt worse than the yelling would have been. It showed she felt no remorse, only embarrassment at getting caught and exposed. The next few days were characterized by this deafening, absolute silence. Chloe had scrubbed her Instagram feed of any pictures featuring the ring, but she hadn't posted anything new. She was completely off the grid. Our parents were heartbroken, caught between a daughter who had just committed an act of theft and a daughter who had publicly exposed her. They kept urging me to reach out, to be the bigger sister, and forgive her. But I couldn't. I was staring at the fact that my sister had been willing to steal the most meaningful object I owned, and the only reason I got it back was because of a damaged follower count. Then, a week after the ring's return, I got an email. It wasn't from Chloe, but from a small local boutique she often tagged. It was a very professional, very cold email, essentially asking me to take down my original Facebook post, stating the negative association was now affecting their brand, even though I hadn't tagged them. It was a bizarre, unexpected complication, and I realized that my public drama had spilled over into the real-world business interests of innocent parties, reminding me that even though the object was safe, the consequences of this exposure were far from over. What was I supposed to tell this random business, and how deep did the consequences of my desperation go? Update 3. The ring is safe. It was dropped off at my parents' house an hour after I issued the ultimatum, but Chloe hasn't contacted me. The silence is brutal. My parents are pushing me to forgive her, but I'm struggling with the total lack of remorse. Now, a small boutique that Chloe used to tag has emailed me, asking me to take down the Facebook post because the negative association is affecting their business. I need to figure out how to respond to this business without getting dragged back into the drama, and I still don't know how to deal with the relationship with my sister. The moment that email from the small boutique landed in my inbox, I realized I was in a completely new phase of the conflict. The direct fight with Chloe was over. I had the ring back, but now I was dealing with the collateral damage her theft and my public exposure had caused. It was a bizarre kind of cleanup operation. The boutique's request for me to take down the Facebook post felt unfair. I hadn't tagged them, and they weren't directly involved, yet they were paying the price for Chloe's lies. I didn't want to cause any more harm to innocent businesses, but I also didn't want to remove the post that was the only proof of why the ring was suddenly back on my finger, potentially letting Chloe spin a completely false narrative again. I decided on a middle ground. I replied to the boutique with a very polite, professionally worded email. I apologized for any distress, explained that the post was simply documenting the return of stolen personal property, and assured them I would not name or tag their business in any future posts. I also offered to add a short sentence to my original update clarifying that the drama was strictly between me and my sister and did not involve any local businesses. It felt like the right thing to do, but it was incredibly draining to have to manage all these side issues because of her. Meanwhile, the silent treatment from Chloe continued. She hadn't posted anything in a week and wouldn't answer calls from anyone. Even my mother was starting to sound truly frustrated and worried instead of just trying to mediate. I kept telling myself that the silence was a win, a sign that she was licking her wounds, but it also felt like a gaping hole where a sister should be. Mark was amazing through all this, but even he confessed the tension was getting to him, especially since our wedding planning was stalled by the family drama. Then, something completely unexpected happened. I received a private message on Instagram from someone I didn't recognize, a girl named Mia. I almost deleted it as spam, but the first sentence grabbed my attention. She started by saying, "I am so sorry for what your sister did to you. I think you need to know she has done this before." My heart started pounding. Mia revealed that she used to be close friends with Chloe and had actually moved out of town after a falling out. She explained that Chloe had a history of borrowing expensive items, purses, watches, even designer clothes, from friends for her photo shoots, and then either damaging them, or worse, refusing to give them back until she was threatened. Mia said she had lost a very valuable watch to Chloe and only got it back after her parents got involved, but the friendship was destroyed. Mia's message was a total revelation. This wasn't a sudden, isolated fit of jealousy. It was a pattern of manipulative behavior she had perfected. Knowing this suddenly clicked everything into place. The audacity, the immediate denial of ownership, and the cold, calculated way she responded to our threats. It wasn't just me. This was just how Chloe operated when she wanted something for her image. It gave me a strange sense of clarity and, honestly, some relief that I wasn't just imagining her level of selfishness. Armed with the knowledge that my sister was a repeat offender, I felt a new resolve. I realized that reconciliation wouldn't be simple. It would require Chloe to genuinely acknowledge her pattern of theft and manipulation, not just apologize for the one time she got caught. I now had proof that she was a serial manipulator. But what was the point of having this new information? I had the ring back, so should I let this new information go? Or should I use Mia's testimony to finally force Chloe into a real reckoning with our parents? Update 4. I managed the fallout with the boutique by offering to clarify my post and not name them, avoiding further collateral damage. Crucially, I was contacted by Mia, a former friend of Chloe's, who confessed that my sister has a history of borrowing and refusing to return expensive items from friends for her photo shoots. This confirmed my fears. It wasn't a one-off mistake, but a calculated pattern of manipulation and theft. I have the ring back, but this new information changes everything about how I view my sister. Do I use this to force her to face our parents, or do I just cut my losses and go full no contact? Mia's message, detailing Chloe's pattern of borrowing and refusing to return expensive items, completely changed the game. The sheer relief of knowing I wasn't dealing with a one-time sibling squabble, but a deep-seated behavioral issue, gave me the courage I needed. I realized that going full no contact now would just let her continue the behavior with the next victim. She needed to be stopped, and my parents needed to understand the full scope of their younger daughter's manipulation. I called my parents and told them I needed to speak to them about Chloe, but it had to be in person and without her present. I didn't tell them about Mia yet, but the seriousness in my voice must have convinced them because they agreed immediately. When Mark and I arrived at their house, they were clearly worried, thinking I was going to announce a permanent estrangement from Chloe. I sat them down and, slowly, calmly, walked them through the entire sequence of events again. The fake photo shoot request, the refusal to return the ring, the unbothered post, and the failed legal threats. Then, I pulled up Mia's message on my phone. I let them read the entire thing, including the part about the stolen watch and the organized manipulation. The color drained from my mother's face as she read the history of calculated deception. My dad, however, became fiercely quiet. He didn't erupt. He just got that look, the one that means he's processing something heavy. He asked me to confirm that Mia was a reliable source, and when I vouched for her honesty, he nodded slowly. He looked up at my mom and me, and what he said next shocked us both, completely reframing my relationship with Chloe and with him. He confessed that this wasn't the first time he'd suspected something like this. He admitted that about 3 years ago, a significant amount of cash disappeared from his home office safe right around the time Chloe needed money for a business opportunity. He said he'd chalked it up to being careless with the combination, But he'd always had a nagging suspicion. He hadn't told anyone because he couldn't bear to accuse his own daughter of theft without absolute proof. The look between my parents was devastating. My mom broke down, finally understanding that my desperation and anger were completely justified. The silence and her refusal to apologize weren't just teenage angst. They were the actions of someone avoiding the consequences of a well-established pattern of deceit. They finally stopped asking me to be the bigger sister and started asking me what they should do. This was my moment. I told them that the only way forward, for Chloe and for the family, was for them to stop enabling her. I explained that I was going no contact until she admitted to the theft of the ring and apologized for her pattern of manipulation. More importantly, I told them they needed to force Chloe to sit down and listen, not just to me, but to Mia's testimony, and that if this behavior continued, she needed to seek professional help, because this was clearly beyond a simple personality flaw. My parents, shattered by the truth, agreed. They decided they would call Chloe and demand a meeting where they would lay out all the evidence: Mia's testimony, my father's suspicion about the cash, and the theft of the ring. They said they couldn't force her to change, but they could absolutely withdraw all financial and emotional support until she agreed to a serious intervention. The stage was set for the final, most painful confrontation. But I still had one major concern. How would Chloe react when confronted with her father's long-held suspicion? And would the fear of losing their support be enough to break her long silence? Update 5. I finally shared Mia's testimony with my parents, proving Chloe has a pattern of theft and manipulation. This led to a devastating confession from my father. He'd suspected her of stealing cash from his safe years ago, but never pursued it. My parents are now united and completely on my side. I told them I'm going no contact until she apologizes and seeks help. They are now arranging a final, serious confrontation, threatening to withdraw all support. I'm incredibly anxious about this meeting. What if Chloe just doubles down and denies everything, completely cutting herself off from the family? The day of the final confrontation felt heavy, like the atmosphere before a massive storm. My parents called Chloe and told her they needed to discuss a serious family matter and that Mark and I would be there. They made it sound non-negotiable, demanding she show up at their house that evening. To my surprise, she didn't block them. She simply sent a one-word text. Fine. When Chloe walked in, she looked terrible. Not apologetic, but hollow and exhausted. The makeup was heavy, but it couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. She clearly hadn't been sleeping well since her online image crumbled. She ignored me completely, giving Mark only a fleeting, resentful glance, and sat down stiffly on the edge of the sofa, arms crossed. She gave off a palpable air of being completely victimized. My dad started the conversation, not by yelling, but by speaking with a low, intense authority I hadn't heard from him since I was a teenager. He laid out the evidence, piece by piece. He started with the theft of the ring and my public post, moving quickly past it because she couldn't deny its return. Then, he delivered the real blow. He brought up Mia's testimony, detailing the history of borrowing and refusing to return expensive items. Chloe's facade finally cracked. She went chalk white. She tried to interrupt, stammering that Mia was a liar and jealous, but my dad simply held up a hand and kept going. He dropped the ultimate hammer, confessing his suspicion about the missing cash from his safe 3 years ago. He looked her straight in the eye and said, "I need to know, Chloe. Was that you?" The silence that followed was agonizing. Chloe looked from my dad to my mom, who was openly weeping, and then briefly to me. There was no defiance left, only a profound, wretched defeat. She didn't confess to the cash theft with words, but with a slight, devastating shake of her head and a gaze fixed on the floor. It was a silent admission of guilt for the pattern, not just for the ring. My dad then explained the family's boundary. I was going no contact indefinitely. They were also withdrawing all financial support. No more help with rent, car payments, or her business expenses. The condition for reconciliation with the family was mandatory: long-term therapy to address the patterns of entitlement and manipulation that were clearly running her life. Chloe finally spoke, her voice flat and tight. It wasn't an apology. It was a cold, bitter rejection. She said she couldn't believe we were all ganging up on her, treating her like a monster over a stupid ring and some old drama. She claimed we had forced her into this life because we never truly supported her career. She refused the therapy, refused the conditions, and stood up, declaring that she wouldn't be held hostage by our demands. She walked out without a hug, without a backward glance, leaving my parents heartbroken and me with a deep, aching sadness. The confrontation achieved clarity, but it came at a terrible price. She had chosen her pride and her manipulation over her family. The air was cleared, the ring was safe, but the sister I thought I had was officially gone. I knew the silence would last, but now I had to figure out how to navigate the holidays and future family events with this massive hostile gap where my sister used to be. The quiet was devastating. Update 6. The final confrontation happened. Chloe was confronted with Mia's testimony and my father's confession about the missing cash, leading to her silent admission of a pattern of guilt. She absolutely refused the condition of therapy and rejected the family's ultimatum, accusing us of ganging up on her. She walked out, choosing her manipulative lifestyle over family reconciliation. I am now officially no contact, and the immediate pain of the loss is overwhelming, but the clarity is absolute. How do I start rebuilding my relationship with my parents and prepare for major family events, knowing she is actively hostile and permanently out of the picture? The silence after Chloe walked out of my parents' house was the most defining sound of the entire ordeal. It wasn't the relief I'd expected after getting the ring back and achieving clarity. It was a deep, hollow sense of grief. I had lost my sister, not through death, but through her own choice to prioritize deceit and entitlement over family love. The clarity was absolute, but the pain was raw. In the immediate aftermath, Mark was my rock. He gently steered me away from the endless loop of what-ifs and should-haves. We focused intensely on our wedding planning, which suddenly felt incredibly precious, a tangible future completely separate from the toxic past. Every time I looked at my emerald-cut ring on my finger, it wasn't a symbol of the drama, but of the strength of our relationship that had survived the attack. Rebuilding the relationship with my parents was a quieter task. They were devastated, deeply wounded by Chloe's cold rejection and her silent admission of the theft pattern. They spent weeks trying to process the fact that they hadn't seen this side of her, or worse, that my dad's long-held suspicion was true. They apologized repeatedly for asking me to be the bigger sister and for not believing me sooner. I reassured them that I knew they were just trying to protect their family, and together, we focused on establishing new, firmer boundaries. The hardest part was the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday. It was tradition for our entire extended family to gather. My parents were unsure how to handle it. I told them simply, I would be there, and I would be happy. If Chloe chose to show up, I would remain cordial but distant. No arguments, no drama, just strict no-contact enforcement. I refused to let her control my life or my joy anymore. My parents agreed they would not invite her or pressure her to attend, making it clear that she was welcome only if she respected the conditions they had set. Chloe didn't show up to Thanksgiving. She had posted a picture of herself at a crowded bar that day, claiming she was celebrating her true, authentic family, her friends. It was a final, petty jab, but by then, it felt distant. Her online engagement had completely dropped off, and the gossip thread about the fake ring influencer was quiet. Her attempt to create a glamorous, fake life had utterly collapsed, and she was now dealing with the quiet reality of her choices. I finally realized the cruelest consequence of her actions wasn't the emotional stress or the temporary loss of the ring. It was that she had traded genuine, unconditional family love for a few days of faked online status. She had completely isolated herself, believing that the validation of strangers was worth more than the love of the people who truly cared for her. Mark and I are getting married next spring. We've decided that Chloe will not be invited. It's a painful decision, but inviting her would be inviting chaos and disrespect to our lifelong commitment. My parents understand and support the decision completely. The engagement ring, the beautiful piece of jewelry that caused so much destruction, is now firmly back where it belongs, symbolizing a future built on honesty and trust, a future she chose to walk away from. Sometimes, I still feel a pang of sadness for the sister I lost, but mostly, I feel a quiet, profound relief. I got my most precious possession back, and more importantly, I finally saw the truth about my family dynamic and stood up for myself. I chose my peace. For anyone out there dealing with a family member who steals or manipulates, the hardest boundary to set is sometimes the one that saves you.